Welcome to Startup Success, the podcast for startup founders and investors. Here you'll find stories of success from others in the trenches as they work to scale some of the fastest growing startups in the world. Stories that will help you in your own journey. Startup Success starts now.
Welcome to Startup Success. Today we have Keith Delaney in the studio, who is the founder and CEO of Primer. Keith, welcome to Startup Success.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I want to talk about Primer and everything you're up to now because it's very exciting. But first, I want to walk through some of your background. And most importantly, though, start with something that's really relevant to founders listening. And that is, we're in a down economy. We're not sure what's going to play out in terms of the next 6 months with the economy. And the sales cycle has been impacted, and it's more challenging than recent years. And you've had some experience with this. So I'd love to get your thoughts and kind of delve into that to start.
Because Primer kind of plays in the marketing and sales SaaS space, we see that with our customers constantly. That is like a continuous refrain. How do we continue to grow? How do we grow more efficiently? It's definitely a topic we've been giving a lot of thought to.
And how do you advise those that are asking you that? What are some of the strategies you recommend?
It's actually really interesting because I think that what's happened with software being in a recession is bringing more attention to something that I think was actually true before, some structural things that were true before we hit this downturn, but it's exacerbating it. Let me paint a picture for a second.
Okay.
Before the downturn, you were seeing a ton of startups pop up, right? Like an explosion of SaaS, right? We're on the downward side of this industrial revolution kind of bell curve. And you saw the huge emphasis on PLG. So you just had like tons of companies fighting for the same number of people's attention. So more competition. You saw at the same time some like foundational changes happening with how companies kind of get discovered by prospective customers. Like Gmail and Outlook are making it a lot harder to kind of crack the inbox and have reliable kind of outbound email delivery. iOS 14 from Apple.
And you're painting a picture that I'm quite familiar with. I like it. Yes.
Sure. So it's like it kind of like people from
right.
Like,
yes.
advertising standpoint, you know.
Yes.
So it was getting harder already. And then the old school kind of B2B demand gen playbook of let's produce a bunch of content, put it out there, hope somebody clicks, visits our website, we nurture them, yada. Like that's just getting played out, right? Mm-hmm. It's experiencing the law of click-throughs. Should I explain what the law of click-throughs is?
Yes, that would be great because I'm like, should I ask? Because I don't know. I'm in marketing, but I'm thinking I don't know if everybody listening knows. So please do because I love it.
I think Andrew Chen, who's at Andreessen and was Uber's main growth guy for a long time, coined this term, I believe. But he points out whenever something new is introduced into the marketing landscape, the click-through rate of it is initially amazing, right? Back in the early 2000s, everybody clicked on banner ads. It was like a 20-30% click-through rate. Now you're lucky if it's like 0.01%, right? So every channel experiences that over time. It's part of what makes marketing really hard is it's constantly shifting underneath your feet. That has been happening with like a lot of the traditional approaches to generating growth and demand. So these things were happening, but something else really powerful was happening too at the same time, which was the VC world is awash in free money. So it doesn't really matter because you can just spend more to acquire customers, and we'll figure it out at some point, how to make it efficient at some point, when efficiency matters. Now, efficiency matters, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of people, like the pendulum has swung so drastically in the other direction that I'm trying to think of like a good analogy. It's like whiplash. People are really wrestling with, what do I do? How do I do things differently? That's the picture.
You painted it very well. It's the story of my life. Anybody in marketing, right?
Yeah.
So we're constantly looking for the next channel.
For the founders out there, be kind to your marketers because you're asking a lot of them right now. Always, but in particular right now. So I'll tell you how we're seeing our customers start doing things differently. Tell me if it resonates.
Okay.
So if your budget's constrained, people are less responsive, like every dollar that you spend, every resource that you do has to have more impact than it had before. So with that, how do I predict and plan, figure out where to invest those resources? That becomes the starting point. And then the answer to that, which is like, this is old school marketing as a premise, but it's like, it always starts with your customers, right? And I think brand marketers talk about that a lot, product marketers talk about that a lot, but there's more and more opportunity to be really, really data driven about it. So it starts by like, not just looking at, like not coming up with like some fuzzy ICP like definition, ideal customer profile. It's like looking at your highest ACV customers, backing into the attributes of them, using that to kind of begin to hone in, okay, here's where we need to focus. Here's where we win. Here's why we win. And then going out and identifying more of those types of companies and orienting all of your efforts in that direction. It's pushing people that were considering kind of the movement towards account-based marketing a lot, like down that road even faster. And it's why companies like 6 Sense and some ABM players are doing very well despite the economy. So putting your audiences at the center is kind of like step one, and figuring out, it's like kind of classic. You got to figure out, okay, where can I reach them? Where can I engage with them? How do they traditionally convert? And then getting in, honing your strategy around that, and then making sure you leave room for experimentation, because you can't not continue to experiment. You just have to do it in tighter cycles. I think that's the key. I'm seeing a lot more folks adopt growth sprints, which I think a lot of the best companies were already doing, but more and more early stage companies are beginning to operate that similar vein. As a result, they're like kind of building that experimentation muscle, which allows them to get signal faster and then decide if they need to double down. We're going to come up with this quarterly plan, and then we're going to wait and see, and then, oh, we missed it this quarter, so we're going to extend it another quarter. Like, that doesn't fly anymore. That feedback loop has to be a lot shorter and a lot faster. I think it's like good rigor.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. I think, like you said, and you always have to keep experimenting, but it's got to be tighter. You've got to be faster to pivot and change and listen to the feedback. But then, like you said in the beginning, going back to the core of marketing with customer and then messaging and positioning directly to them, like those fundamentals that we all learned very early on are so important right now. So I couldn't agree more. And you're so knowledgeable, and I want to share with the audience, some of your experiences, Dropbox, Eden, through those, because everybody listening knows those names, and kind of your roles there, and kind of, lessons learned and how you're applying that. We'll get into it later to Primer, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, happy to. But one thing I want to say that I should have mentioned is like, I think for the last at least 5 years, people have been leading with the channel.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
Yeah. It's like LinkedIn, or we need to invest in LinkedIn, or we need to try Facebook, or we got to spin up outbound.
Right.
And that,
or TikTok. That's what everyone. Yes, TikTok, we need to be on TikTok now. And it's all, again, it's the channel. Not, well, wait. Let's just take a step back. What about our customer and TikTok?
And where are our customers? It's like, it makes me kind of want to go back to like old school media buying.
Yes.
It's like, who are our most valuable customers, and where are they spending their time, and what's the path to conversion for them been? And then how do we build that into our new growth loop? And that is actually where, like, a good segue to Dropbox. That was like early, before Reforge, before a lot of the talks, Darius Contractor and Brian Chen, Brian Balfour, all those guys. Like, that was like the center of that environment, talking about growth loops and the development of those. So it was really cool to learn that at like the epicenter of it at the time when it was really kind of forming a methodology and a way of thinking about the kind of link between product and growth and marketing. So that was sort of my first foray into tech, and it was amazing. And then the company got bigger, and I wanted to go smaller, so I joined Eden right when I graduated from Y Combinator and helped scale them. And I think that was like another interesting opportunity to replicate the growth function of a company like Dropbox at another but much earlier stage startup. And that's when I realized, like, wow, the power of all of this, the kind of growth engineering resource that we had at Dropbox to pull all these disparate data sets together and enable all of these motions, like that is actually like the secret sauce behind most outside of product, behind like Samsara's success, behind Rippling's success, behind Ramp's success, behind all these startups. They're foundationally built on how do I gather and centralize as much of the relevant data as possible and then deploy that across my marketing and sales motions.
Really well said. And so how do you, I mean, you're doing that so well at Dropbox, and I get to go on to your next challenge because that's something I love to do as well. Did I hear you say you joined Eden right after they came out of Y Combinator?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How fun. So you were there for the ride. So then how do you make that happen there? You were head of growth, right?
It was really a lot of like duct tape and glue and a village in Pakistan that I was supporting via Upwork. You try to take the framework of the system and build it however you can with the resources that you have. So it's about making trade-offs and accepting inefficiencies where it's possible. I'll give you an example. We tested our way into, this is 6-7 years ago, it's 5 years ago. So like outbound cold email engines were still really effective.
Right, they were working then.
They were working. The bar to making them work was certainly a lot lower. Okay, that was great. We got this engine humming, but then it was like, oh, we need to feed the beast. Like, how do we get more records, right? How do we get more records? And we just went deeper into how do we stack these databases on top of each other to increase our coverage amongst our target market, right? Because incrementally, Apollo, back when they were Zen Prospect, has this much coverage. If you layer on a scraper, you can get 30% more. Then you layer on another database, you can get some X% more. And then all of a sudden, you got maybe 80% of your TAM, your ICP, kind of like accessible and reachable via email. That's really powerful. Didn't have a data engineer to do that. So just kind of hacked it together, right? Zapier, Google Sheets, offshore teams, whatever, you make it work. Those are the kinds of the scrappy things that I think early stage startups have to do. And it's kind of the fun and the joy of being in it early. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well said. And so then now all this experience, tell us about Primer.
Primer was kind of born out of that. We had a bunch of work emails. Then it was sort of like, well, I can upload them to LinkedIn and I can turn them into an ad audience on LinkedIn, and then I can start serving ads to the same people I'm emailing. And man, wouldn't it be great if I could turn that into a Facebook audience? How do I do that? Well, grab the recruiting tool, enrich the list with like personal emails using like a Chrome plugin for finding folks' personal emails. It's like, if I enrich these with just some personal emails, my match rate on Facebook goes from 10% using a work email to more like 40%. All of a sudden, Facebook is a viable channel for us to reach our audience. These learnings about how connecting data together, how that can unlock new growth motions, new channels, became kind of the premise for Primer. So what we're doing is kind of trying to provide that data engineering off the shelf for go-to-market teams. So you need to stack Apollo and ZoomInfo on top of each other to increase your depth of coverage of your ICP. That like you can just kind of do inside of Primer. You need to mix that with your Salesforce data and push it to an ad audience on Facebook. You can do that inside of Primer, leveraging like funding data from Harmonic. So it's sort of like an orchestration platform for all those like B2B data sources that like power a lot of go-to-market teams.
That's fantastic, because back when I was at a B2B startup, I remember saying if we could just take the data from both, right, and somehow connect it, we would be able to target our audience so efficiently. And that's what you're doing for your clients.
Yeah, that's it. Again, I think a lot of like later stage organizations build this themselves, right? And that was what we were talking to friends in this space, and let's make that accessible for like the Series A, Series B kind of startup as well, or maybe the ones that aren't Silicon Valley based,
Right, that don't have the teams to make that happen themselves. So who are your customers primarily, like SaaS, Series A, Series B startups?
Yeah, like it's a Series D. Not everybody
Okay.
thinks with that sort of aggressive growth data engineering mindset of like some of the companies that I mentioned. So yeah, we're serving lots of, but that doesn't mean that their marketing teams don't have that same instinct, right? They just
Right.
don't have the resources. And that's, so yeah, we work with companies like, Ironclad, Air, Twingate,
Fun.
lots of fun folks.
So is each interaction with the client kind of like a project that your team is rolling out through Primer, or are there some kind of standard things that you can do within Primer?
You can like sign up and just
Okay, good. And so we always kind of wrap up the show with advice for founders. You've been in a founding role now for how many years?
3 years.
Okay, 3 years. Okay, so we love to ask founders kind of to share some advice that they've gleaned along the way. It's kind of one of our most popular parts of the show. So anything you could share for those listening would be great.
Have a co-founder that complements you. Never solo found. I hope some of my friends are listening to this. Actually, now that I say that. I mean, this is going to be maybe some more cliches, which is everything takes longer than you think it will. Like the best thing you can do is make trade-offs with a lot of discipline. The best thing you can do is kind of validate your hypotheses with data as fast as possible, and then like don't be too hard on yourself when you make bets and they don't work out, because that'll happen a lot.
Those are not cliches. I mean, it's a running theme we hear here. A lot of people say you're like a scientist, right? You're experimenting, listen to the data, and cut yourself some slack when you have to change. It sounds like you've kind of experienced that yourself.
Yeah, being a founder, there's so much of yourself is wrapped up in it, so much of your own pride or sense of self-worth that like you take those wins really personally, but you can also take those losses a little personally. And I've had to learn how to check my ego a bunch in all of this in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
That makes sense. So if I'm listening and I want to find out more about Primer, what's the best way to do that, and some resources that you have available?
Yeah, check out sayprimer.com. That's our website. And then please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Keith Putnam-Delaney. Blog has actually like a lot of articles on this topic of how to grow in this down market, what the right MarTech stack looks like for an early stage startup, all kind of things that I've gleaned from the last, like I said, decade of doing this in tech. Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Well, I will have to check that out. And speaking of channel, I mean, we are always looking about founders and where they are. LinkedIn, they're all LinkedIn. So you mentioned LinkedIn. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you, Keith, for being here. It was really fun chatting with you.
Yeah, back at you, Kate. Thanks so much for having me.
You've been listening to Startup Success. To make sure you don't miss out on future episodes, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. Like what you hear? Tap the number of stars you think the show deserves in Apple Podcasts. For more tools and resources for your own startup success, check out burklandassociates.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.